She thought I was just a woman in jeans, out of place in her luxury hotel, until her hand connected with my face. She had no idea she had just slapped the new owner. The air in the lobby of the grand, majestic hotel was thick with the scent of lilies and old money. It was a calculated aroma designed to soothe the wealthy and intimidate the rest. I, for one, was in the rest category today. Dressed in a pair of well-worn jeans, a simple gray cashmere sweater, and comfortable flats, I probably looked more like someone who had wandered in off the street looking for a restroom than the person who had signed the check to acquire the entire hotel chain 3 weeks ago. This was my way. Before I make any changes, before my face is known to the executive staff, I like to see my assets from the ground up. I experience them as a customer, an anonymous, unassuming customer. I stood in line, patiently observing. The woman at the front desk was a masterpiece of severe efficiency. Her name tag read Carol, and she wore it like a military decoration. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a bun so tight it seemed to be pulling her face into a permanent state of disapproval. I watched her handle a young couple ahead of me, her voice dripping with condescending sweetness as she informed them their bank-issued debit card wasn't sufficient for the hotel's incidental policy. They retreated, embarrassed and flustered. My stomach tightened. That wasn't our policy. Then it was my turn. I stepped up to the gleaming marble counter and gave her a small, polite smile. "Hello, I have a reservation. The name is Imani King." Carol's eyes did a slow, insulting sweep from my practical shoes to my simple hairstyle, a cloud of natural curls I refused to tame for anyone. A tiny, dismissive smirk played on her lips. "King," she repeated, her fingers tapping a staccato rhythm on her keyboard without actually typing. "And what kind of room would someone like you be checking into?" The King," I said, keeping my voice even. "The presidential suite." I'd booked it under my own name. It was a test, a little bit of bait to see what would happen. Her fingers froze. She finally looked at me directly, her blue eyes sharp and disbelieving. "That's impossible. The King suite is reserved for our most distinguished clientele." The unspoken words hung in the air between us. "And you are not it." "Well, today I'm it," I said, my smile not wavering. "Could you please check again? King." With an exaggerated sigh, she typed in the name. I watched the screen from my angle, saw my name pop up in bold, a long string of VIP indicators next to it. Her face tightened further. The flicker of shock was quickly replaced by renewed suspicion. "I'll need to see a photo ID and the credit card used for the booking." Her tone implied she was certain I possessed neither. I slid my driver's license across the counter, followed by the sleek, heavy black card that had paid for the reservation. The American Express Centurion card. It was obnoxious, I knew, but it was also a useful tool. A key that opened doors and, in this case, a lie detector. Carol picked it up as if it were contaminated. She stared at the name. Imani N. King. Then at my face, then back at the card. Her mind was visibly short-circuiting, unable to reconcile the woman in jeans with the owner of this particular piece of plastic. For a moment I thought she might actually process the information and do her job. I was wrong. Her suspicion curdled into outright hostility. "This is not yours," she said, her voice dropping to a low, accusatory hiss. She placed the card on the counter, but kept her hand possessively over it. "People like you don't have cards like this." The lobby suddenly felt very quiet. The couple she had dismissed earlier was lingering by the entrance, watching. A bellhop froze mid-step. I took a slow breath, the scent of lilies now feeling cloying, suffocating. "People like me?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. "What kind of people are those, Carol?" "Thieves," she spat, her professionalism shattering like cheap glass. "You waltz in here, dressed like you just came from the bus station and expect me to believe this is yours? I'm calling security. We don't tolerate fraud at the Grand Majestic." "That won't be necessary," I said, reaching for my card. "Just give me my key." As my fingers brushed against hers, she recoiled. And then, everything happened in slow motion. Her face contorted with a rage that was utterly shocking in its intensity. Her hand, the one that had been guarding my card, flew up. I saw it coming but was too stunned to move. The sharp crack echoed through the cavernous lobby. Her palm connected with my cheek with a force that snapped my head to the side. A stinging white-hot pain bloomed across my skin. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. For a heartbeat there was absolute silence. My cheek throbbed. My ears rang. I slowly turned my head back to face her. I saw no remorse in her eyes, only a sort of wild, triumphant justification. She truly believed she had caught a criminal, and she was proud of it. The pain in my cheek was nothing compared to the cold, quiet fury that began to solidify in my chest, turning from a liquid burn into a shard of ice. I raised my hand, not to strike back, but to gently touch the spot where she'd hit me. I looked her dead in the eye. The polite, unassuming customer was gone. She had been slapped right out of me. In her place was the billionaire who owned the very marble she was standing on. My voice, when it came out, was barely a whisper, yet it cut through the silence like a razor. "You have no idea what you've just done." Carol's triumphant expression wavered for a fraction of a second, replaced by a flicker of confusion. But her arrogance was a fortress. She quickly rebuilt her walls, her lip curling in a sneer. "A threat? Is that what that was? Security!" she barked, her voice sharp and loud now, projecting for the benefit of the growing audience. "I have a trespasser here, attempting to use a stolen credit card and threatening staff." Two men in ill-fitting blazers materialized from a side hallway. They were built like refrigerators and moved with a ponderous lethargy that suggested they spent most of their shifts watching videos on their phones. "Ma'am, you're going to have to come with us," the taller one said, his voice a bored monotone. He reached for my arm. I took a step back, holding up my hand. The gesture was not defensive. It was commanding. "Don't touch me," I said, my voice still quiet, but now laced with a thread of steel that made both men pause. The sting on my cheek was a constant pulsing reminder of the line that had been crossed. This was no longer just about poor customer service. This was about assault. "Just grab her for goodness sake," Carol shrieked, her composure unraveling completely. "She assaulted me." A low murmur went through the onlookers. A lie. A blatant, desperate lie. But in this tableau, who looked more credible? The uniformed manager with the carefully constructed facade of authority, or the woman in jeans she had just slapped? Ignoring the guards and the frantic manager, I pulled my phone from my pocket. My hands were perfectly steady. I bypassed my contacts and speed-dialed number 1. Arthur Vance, my chief operating officer. A man who could move mountains with a single phone call. He answered on the first ring. "Arthur, it's Imani," I said, my voice calm and clear. I kept my eyes locked on Carol, watching the blood drain from her face as she heard the authority in my tone. "I'm in the lobby of the Grand Majestic, New York. There's been an incident." I listened for a moment. Arthur's concerned voice a tinny buzz on the other end. "An employee assault," I continued. "Yes, physical. The front desk manager. Her name is Carol." I made a point of reading her name tag slowly and deliberately. "I need you to contact the regional director and the hotel's general manager immediately. Tell them to get to the lobby. Now. Also, have our asset protection team start pulling all security footage from the front desk for the last 10 minutes. And Arthur," I paused, letting the silence hang. "Terminate Carol's network access. All of it. Effective immediately." I hung up. The entire phone call took less than 40 seconds. The lobby was dead silent now. The security guards looked at each other. Their procedural certainty completely evaporated. They were just two guys on an hourly wage, and they had just heard a conversation that sounded far, far above their pay grade. Carol let out a choked, hysterical laugh. "Who was that? Your daddy? Your pimp? You think you can come in here and fool us with some little act?" She was flailing, trying to regain control, but the fear was visible in her eyes. She knew something was wrong. She just couldn't comprehend the scale of it. "I think you should have just given me my key," I said softly. We stood there in a bizarre standoff for what felt like an eternity but was probably only 3 minutes. Me, standing perfectly still. The guards, frozen in indecision. And Carol, whose face was a cycling montage of rage, fear, and disbelief. The elevator doors at the far end of the lobby dinged open. A man in a pristine charcoal gray suit practically sprinted out. He was impeccably dressed, but his face was pale and beaded with sweat, his eyes wide with panic. I recognized him from the acquisition file. Mr. Davies, the general manager, Carol's boss's boss. His eyes scanned the scene, his gaze flying past the security guards, past the onlookers, and past Carol. It landed on me, and his face, already pale, turned the color of ash. He completely ignored his screaming front desk manager and the two hulking security guards. He rushed towards me, his hands held up in a placating gesture, his expression one of pure, unadulterated terror. "Ms. King," he gasped, his voice tight with panic. He stopped a few feet away from me, practically bowing. "Oh my God, Miss King, I am so sorry. I came as soon as I heard. Please, whatever my staff has done, I assure you it is a catastrophic misunderstanding." He finally risked a glance at Carol, and his eyes widened in horror as he saw the raw red mark blooming on my cheek. He looked from my face to Carol's hand, and in that instant the entire universe of his career collapsed in on itself. He turned back to me, his voice trembling. "What? What did she do?" I didn't answer Mr. Davies. I just held his gaze, letting the silence and his own dawning horror do the work for me. His eyes, full of terror, darted back to Carol, who was now staring at him as if he'd grown a second head. The name Ms. King meant nothing to her, but the GM's reaction was a language she understood perfectly. It was the language of power, and for the first time she seemed to realize she was on the wrong side of it. "Mr. Davies, what is going on?" she demanded, her voice a shrill, cracking imitation of her earlier authority. "This woman is a trespasser. She's a fraud. I was handling it." Davies flinched as if she had struck him. He took a hesitant step closer to me, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper. "Ms. King, on behalf of the entire Grand Majestic brand, I am mortified. Please, let's go to my office. We can sort this out. I'll get you anything you need. A doctor? The police?" "The police might be a good idea," I said, my voice as cold and hard as the marble floor. "Since your employee committed battery, right here." I gestured to the cluster of security cameras embedded in the ornate ceiling. On camera. The last vestiges of color drained from Carol's face. The word battery hung in the air, ugly and undeniable. She looked from me to Davies, her mind finally connecting the dots. The name on the Centurion card. The immediate, panicked response from the general manager. The way he was speaking to me, like I was royalty and she was the dirt on his shoes. The realization hit her not like a gentle wave, but like a tsunami, wiping away her arrogance and leaving behind pure, stark terror. "Owner, you're Miss King," she stammered, the words catching in her throat. "The new owner." I simply nodded, watching her. There was no satisfaction in her fear, only a profound sense of disappointment. This was my hotel, my brand. And this woman, this embodiment of petty prejudice and misplaced power, was its face. "Carol," Mr. Davies said, his voice shaking with a fury he was trying desperately to contain in my presence. "You are terminated. Effective immediately. Security," he snapped at the two frozen statues in blazers. "Escort Ms. Escort this person off the premises. Now, she is not to touch anything. Her personal effects will be mailed to her." The guards, finally given a clear directive they could understand, moved towards a now sobbing Carol. "No, please, Mr. Davies, I didn't know," she wailed, her carefully constructed persona completely shattered. "It was a mistake. I was just trying to protect the hotel." "You weren't protecting the hotel, Carol," I said, speaking to her for the last time. "You were protecting your own bigotry. You saw a black woman in jeans and you made an assumption. You assumed she couldn't possibly belong here, that her success wasn't real, that her money was stolen. You didn't see a customer. You didn't even see a person. You saw a stereotype, and then you assaulted her. That's not a mistake. That's a choice." She had no answer. As the guards led her away, her cries of, "I'm sorry," and "please," echoed through the silent lobby, a pathetic postscript to her monumental error in judgment. Once she was gone, a heavy silence fell. Mr. Davies looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. "Ms. King," he began. I don't know what to say. There are no words. An apology is insufficient. I take full responsibility. I held up a hand. You're right. It is insufficient. This wasn't just about one employee, Mr. Davies. This was a symptom of a sickness in the culture here. The young couple she turned away before me? For using a debit card? You and I both know that's not company policy. That was her, making a judgment, deciding who was and who wasn't grand majestic material. That attitude comes from the top down. He swallowed hard, nodding. Yes, ma'am. You're right. I'm checking in now, I said, my tone final. Have a bellhop send my bags to the King's suite. I'll take my own key. I reached over the counter, my black card still sitting there, and plucked my room key from the slot myself. You and I have a meeting scheduled for 9 a.m. tomorrow. Don't be late. We are going to be discussing a complete overhaul of your front-of-house training, starting with unconscious bias and de-escalation. And we're going to discuss your future with this company. Because if this is the standard you've set, I assure you, it will not be the standard going forward. Without another word, I turned and walked towards the elevators, leaving him standing there, pale and trembling, in the center of his lobby. The eyes of every guest and staff member were on me. The hushed whispers followed me like a wave. As the polished bronze doors of the elevator slid shut, I leaned against the cool wall and touched my cheek. It still throbbed, a dull, aching fire. But as the elevator ascended towards the penthouse, towards my suite, my view, my hotel, I knew one thing for certain. Change was coming to the Grand Majestic. It had started with a slap, and it would end with a revolution. My revolution